I want to focus on the final words of Jesus on the cross, as they're recorded in the Gospel of John, and why these matter to me in my day-to-day life at work. Later, knowing that everything had now been finished, and so that the scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, "I'm thirsty." And a jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked a sponge in it, put the sponge on a stalk of a hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." And with that he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. It is finished. I remember when there was a big disaster on the Thames River in London. A pleasure boat, the Marchioness, struck another vessel and started to sink. The Marchioness had been in the middle of hosting a big birthday party for a young city worker, and several colleagues of mine were on board at the time. One of them saw a woman and a child trapped on the wrong side of the chasm created by the inrushing water. On the one side was safety. On the other side was assured drowning and death. The woman and the child were on the far side with no means of crossing. So my colleague laid himself down across the torrent of water. The newspapers called him a human bridge. And the woman and her child literally clambered over him to safety. I've always thought that this selfless act gives us a great picture which helps us understand what Jesus meant when he said, "It is finished." Because when Jesus said, "It is finished," he didn't mean he was finished. 3 days later, he rose again. This wasn't a moment of resignation, but a moment of victory. It was not he, but his task that was finished. And his task had been to build a bridge between sin and safety, to form a crossing over this raging cauldron, this gorge of rushing water that is the power of sin to cut us off from God. You see, we're trapped on the side of sin. What is sin, and does it mean anything for our generation? Simply put, sin is the actions that create a separation between us and God. The things that we've done wrong, the things we haven't done, the shame we feel, the anger we express, the greed we can't get rid of. But that's not the end of the story. On the other side, across the chasm, is the safety of a relationship with Jesus Christ and with the Father, and the freedom and the security that this relationship brings. In the Marchioness, my colleague who was standing on the side of safety decided to cross over onto the side of death in order to help that woman and child escape. And so Jesus, who is God and is with God in perfect relationship, became the human bridge that enabled us to cross from death to life. But I think people forget that we still have to walk across that bridge. We need to accept that intimate relationship with God that Jesus offers us in his death. It's not something that's forced on us. What a strange kingdom in which God himself, the King of Kings, would lay himself down as a bridge. The only bridge that can take us from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light, from sin to safety, a bit like that man lying across a torrent of water. So how do we respond? Frank Sinatra's "I Did It My Way" is one of the most often used pieces of music at funerals. We all want to say that we live our lives our own way. Many people refuse to walk across the bridge. Sometimes they're not interested in getting to the other side. Sometimes they're convinced that they can make it on their own. As Isaiah 53 puts it, we all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way. But we need to be willing to say, I did it His way. Why? Because of what He has done for us. Jesus looks at what we've done. He looks at our shame, and He takes that shame upon Himself. He takes the brutal and He makes it beautiful. He takes the rough edges of disobedience and forms the smooth building blocks of a life lived in all its fullness. That is His way. He became the bridge, and as you face situations this coming week, look to Jesus and not to your own strength in attempting to cross this chasm alone. Do you feel you're living every single aspect of life Jesus' way or your way? Do you completely rely on God in every situation you face at work? Or is it, as I've often found, a 50-50 split between His way and my way? Do you trust Him enough to cross the bridge of life from one season to another, confident that He has gone ahead of you to make it possible to do so? Think about a situation at work in which you've had a bad experience and find it difficult to move on, holding on to past hurt. Remember that not only is the past finished, but He has built the bridge to the new. You could also be the bridge for someone at work who has hit the rough time and needs help to forget what lies behind and move forward with fresh perspective. Let's take a minute now to be still and to hear from God. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making His appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. God made Him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in Him we might become the righteousness of God. For the week ahead, remember these 3 things at work. Be willing, rise to the challenge, cross the bridge, and live God's way every day, His strength and His power. Be humble. We cannot cross the chasm alone. Humble yourself before Christ and rely fully on Him. Trust Him. He is the bridge to living life in all its fullness. Be hopeful. It is finished does not mean He was finished. It doesn't mean you're finished. The end of one season in life is the bridge to another. It's not the end of your destiny. So be willing, be humble, be hopeful.